Call the September 28, 2020 Village of Cache Creek Council meeting, regular council meeting order. No delegations, we'll move on to the minutes. Any additions to or deletions from the minutes of September 14th, 2020?
I'll move they be adopted.
Second.
I just have one, if I may. Page 5. And item 9. That should read that Councillor Pittman did not provide the letter in question that was different from every other letter that was sent out. She did provide the letter that everybody else got, but not the one that was in question.
I understand, all right.
Thank you. Anything further?
As amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Opposed.
Business arising from delegations? None?
I do. I have some, however, I would like to address them in the in-camera portion of today's meeting, under section 90.1 A and C, please, and thank you.
From delegations?
Oh, from the, arising from the minutes. You said, you asked for business arising from the minutes, and I have some.
No, I did not. I asked for business arising from delegations.
Okay.
What would you
So-
prefer?
No, sorry. No, I'll wait till.
Business arising from the minutes.
And that, I do have some, however, I would like to address them in the in-camera portion of today's meeting. Thank you.
Further? Committee reports? Economic Development, Councillor Peters and Councillor Cover.
I have nothing.
Thank you. Budget and Administrative Services, Councillor Peters and Councillor Coomer.
I would move that council supports the application for funding under UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant application, structural flood mitigation.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
I'll move that council confirms that the village will be providing overall grant management.
Second.
Discussion?
Bring me.
In favor? Thank you. 2020 tax sale. CFO Martini to provide verbal update on this year's tax sale.
So we conducted the tax sale for this year's delinquent taxes, and we didn't have any bid on those properties, and so it means that properties reverted to us, to the village. So now we will have to decide if we are going to have other tax sales until we receive any viable bid.
There are several options for how we can proceed. At the moment, the tax sale is over and done with, so what we can do is hold them over. There's a certain time period where there's for lack of a better word, this is not how the legislation works, that there's a forgiveness period where the property owner has an opportunity to redeem the property and get it back. There are options where within a certain time frame, all they have to pay is 50% of what they owe. There are several options that we will be putting together in a letter to notify the property owners as to what their options are.
Okay. There was 4 properties or 4 structures?
Three properties.
Policy and bylaw review, myself and Councillor Peters. Nothing, no meeting, no report on my end, unless there's something, Councillor Peters. as far as permissive?
I
The
will have to
permissive tax.
declare a conflict. I'm on the board of directors for the Ashburn
Thank you.
TV Society.
Thank you.
Total figgins on my phone.
The council approves the application for permissive tax exemptions.
Second?
Discussion?
I just was a little disappointed that the one group didn't have the numbers for how many Cache Creek members had the benefit for it. The Equality Project.
What page?
It was just that they didn't have any numbers under the statistics for how many residents of Cache Creek had any benefit to it. They didn't have a record of that.
Do you remember which page that was on?
It was in addition to the notice here, so I was on page 33. Or 34. 34. I was hoping that maybe next year they'll have a better
Yeah.
breakdown of that for next year.
I will point that out to them.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further? All in favor? Carried. Permissive tax exemption bylaw 819/2020. The Village of Cache Creek permissive tax exemption bylaw number 819/2020 be given first reading as presented.
Second?
Dis-
So moved.
So moved. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Recommendation 2, that the Village of Cache Creek permissive tax exemption bylaw number 819/2020 be given second reading as presented.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor? That the Village of Cache Creek permissive tax exemption bylaw number 819/2020 be given third reading as presented.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried.
Just started with my key.
Joint by law enforcement. The council appoint a representative to sit on the joint by law enforcement advisory committee.
I'll move that we send Councillor Peters as a part of the bylaw committee.
Any further?
We need a second, and yes, Councillor Peters, even though you're the subject of the motion, yes, you can second.
Oh, okay, I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Public Works and Community Facilities, myself and Councillor Dafoe. No meeting, no report. Village Services and Liaison, Councillor Dafoe and Councillor Coomber.
I just have a quick report from Hat Creek Ranch. We had another virtual meeting on September 16th. We're really hating these virtual meetings now these days. So we replaced the treasurer. Colin Williams resigned last month, and Faye Morrison has taken that place. And Roger Tinney from the Heritage Branch was online with us, and he just went over some administrative stuff. We have new forms to fill out. And he just explained them in a little bit more detail. New forms in order to get money for projects. And he's going to set up virtual meeting with our manager and go over them so we all understand them a little bit better. And the cabins have been renovated a little bit with new decks and wider doors, and that's the meeting.
Thank you.
If you have written notes, if I could maybe get a photocopy of them before we leave for the night.
Sure.
Thank you.
Have they had very much success with their appointments to go and make purchases in the stores and stuff? Did they say anything about that?
Yep. The manager was a little disappointed it didn't turn out as well as he thought it would, but I think they've had about 4,000 in sales since the spring, so probably not as much, not even a fraction of what they would have
Or
if
what they would
people
normally
were going in and purchasing,
off the buses.
off the buses, but it is what it is.
Hopefully by next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further? Protective Services, myself and Councillor Cooper. Nothing. Intergovernmental Relations, myself and Councillor Cooper and Councillor Peter as UBCM update.
Yeah, UDCM, our annual convention went from, 4.5 days in Victoria to 2.5 days sitting here in the council chambers. What a difference. It was a huge endeavor, so, there was some technology challenges sort of expected when you live stream and have voting and presenters coming in from all over the place, and an election call a day or two before.
One day before.
Yeah, which meant rearranging all the panels that are usually top-heavy with provincial ministers and ministry reps. They did a pretty good job. I'll give them that. There were a lot of glitches, and yeah, I went through, 3-4 passwords before the conference was over, just because, I don't know, some...
They couldn't convince you to add another O to your name? It was all your fault.
Cooper, yes. But they did have the usual panels like public transit, and there was a lot of rebuilding after COVID, and some good suggestions. The resolution that we submitted came up in the resolution book, but we had 3 hours this year to debate resolutions, and because of the technology it was rather slow, so ours did not reach the floor, unfortunately, along with many dozens of other resolutions. So what they will do with those is their executive will review them and decide how to proceed with them. The ones that they decide to forward to the provincial government, when there is a provincial government, will be forwarded, and the ones that are not, I'm not quite clear on what will happen to them. I guess they just go into the file.
The only thing I have to add is that, yeah, it was a little bit challenging. Some key points for me was the discussion with Dr. Bonnie Henry and the Honourable Jana Austin, Lieutenant Governor for BC, and Kim Baird, the former chief of the Tsawwassen First Nations, talking about, and Maya Tate, the UBCM president, talking about their experiences as women in leadership and some of the things that they've gone through, including Dr. Henry having to have security at her home because of death threats. But their common thread was that we have to work together and recognize diversity and have to mentor other women that want to come into being leaders in their communities in any way we can. And ironically, the session after that was digitally enabled, remote, and ready. And if Wendy and I hadn't been here at council chambers with 2 different computers, I wouldn't have been able to see the Bonnie Henry presentation because my computer it just buffered through the whole thing. So I leaned over her shoulder and watched hers. Another high point for me was Margaret Atwood, her presentation. She's a very, very wise woman. She has a lot of experience in a lot of different areas, and one of the kind of weird, cool things was a reference was made to a book that she wrote 20 years ago that we're pretty much living right now. So that was interesting. Again,
I'll bet that was more like 40 years
or
ago.
40 years ago. Okay.
What's the title?
Surviving or Survivor. There was an interesting session that I also saw on seniors' homes, and Interior Health has some work to do. That's all I'll say. My overall impression was a virtual convention takes away from a lot of the one-on-one and or small group discussions that you have outside of all of the workshops and the meetings. There was a virtual lounge, but I went into it a couple of times and there was nobody in there. So, but it's that networking and that listening to other people's issues and how they resolve them, because a lot of them, especially in small rural communities, we all have those issues. So that to me, it's one of the most valuable things about those kinds of get-togethers. Again, as Wendy said, considering that the provincial election was called the day before, they had to scramble because a lot of the workshops involved members, MLAs and their staff, so, and ministers, and the connectivity issues. And the only other thing I have to say is if next year's virtual again, that I would suggest that one member could attend and report back, because you know, it was nice. There was a couple of times there was 2 sessions, and they were supposed to be available for us online within 24 to 48 hours, but now they're saying September 30th, so we can go back in and watch those other sessions. So where in the past we've kind of picked so that somebody attended everything, it was a little harder this time, but they're available to view after the fact. So.
A couple of the better, in my opinion, panels that were held was public transit recovery and rebuild, and they talked a bit about BC Transit and how ridership dropped to 30% in March, and now it's back up to 60%, but their priority is to make customers feel safe, so they're doing the mask and the social distancing thing, the face masks. The province has given them $86 million to get them through this year and into the next. And the Community Excellence Awards, have to say, Ashcroft got an honorable
Congratulations,
mention
Ashcroft.
for Yogi Bala's asset management program. I thought he should have won, but
So did we.
yeah, oh well. And just to add to what Councillor Peters said about the keynote speaker, Margaret Atwood, she asked us, what does your community need the most right now? And she urged us to put every possible effort into achieving it. Size doesn't matter if there is a will to achieve it and a commitment to do it.
Thank you. Further?
I should also mention that we did have our meeting with Minister Doug Donaldson a few days before UBCM started. And the topic with the minister was the installation of Cache Creek and Bonaparte River watershed snow gauges and also river gauges. And he was very receptive to both, and we recognize that he's not running again in this election, but I think we did have a positive discussion with him, and he had much of his staff listening in, and also our MLA, Jackie Taggart, who was with us on both, sorry, I guess she wasn't, yeah, she wasn't.
Yeah,
she was still our
She
MLA.
was still, yeah.
Who was with us on both the meeting with Minister Donaldson and Minister Claire,
Trevina.
yes, from Modi. So that's all I have.
Just one very minor clarification. And we made this clear to the minister. We understood that Linrod or the province was not responsible for those river gauges. What we were really looking for was their support to lobby on our behalf of the federal government to reinstate some of the old gauges and maybe put some new ones in.
And snow gauging up above Cache Creek.
Yeah,
It's to their benefit.
Mm.
it
Yes,
is.
they spend a lot of money on us over the summer.
Any further? Request for letter of support. Staff be directed to prepare a letter of support for the city of New Westminster or the council receive and file.
I'll make a motion that we receive and file.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Landfill Advisory Committee, that would be my appointment, and Councillor Cooper was on the committee before, and would you accept?
I'd love to.
It's gonna be a little bit of a challenging, position, more so than in the past. I'm gonna make a prediction. Information correspondence,
Can I change my mind?
no.
I wouldn't anyway.
Information correspondence,
None?
thank you. New business? Seeing none, questions from the public? Questions from the press? Your road.
Through the chair, I just noticed in the permissive tax exemptions, there had been some discussion at the council table here about asking a question of organizations about being more accessible. Now, question 4, how is your organization equally accessible to the public? Does your organization require any type of membership? And they've all answered that. But I understood the discussion to be trying to elicit a response as to whether they were accessible in terms of people with wheelchair mobility access. And none, as it's written, question 4 does not ask that, and no one has actually answered that question. So I'm just asking, is that going to be changed for next year, since it was a discussion around the council table when everyone was in favor of?
That's correct. That is a proper assumption on your part that we did talk about that.
So are there plans to then change it for next year to clarify the language around that?
Yes.
Thank you.
So that was in reference to physical accessibility?
Yes.
That's right.
I would point out that I believe both churches, the Equality Project, the TV Society, I'm not sure about the gun range. Anyway, the others are all, as far as I know, accessible.
Any further from the press? Motion to move into a closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Any, all in favor? Carried.